The bat-eared fox reached the night track after full dark, when the heat had already begun to leave the ground, but had not yet finished moving upward. The savanna lay open and low, broken only by sparse grass, termite mounds, and the faint rise of compacted earth where vehicles passed irregularly. The track cut through this space as two shallow lines pressed into soil and dust, pale under starlight. From a distance, it looked quiet, too quiet. The fox approached slowly, ears high and wide, rotating independently to read the ground long before it read the air. Its body stayed low, light, almost hesitant, not from fear, but from calculation. Night tracks were useful. They concentrated insects. They carried scent longer. They reflected sound differently, often revealing movement that open ground swallowed, but only when dust behaved. The fox stopped at the edge of the track and listened. Nothing moved, no beetle clicks, no rodent scratches, no wing beats cutting air. But the dust was wrong. It hung, not visibly, audibly. The fox shifted one paw forward, barely touching the surface of the track. The dust lifted in a faint, soft bloom, and did not fall immediately. It hovered just long enough to blur the sound of the fox's own movement. That was the warning. Dust should settle fast at night. Cooling air thickened it. Moisture pulled it down. When dust stayed suspended, it meant the air near the ground was still warm and still moving. Thermal delay. The fox stepped fully onto the track and froze. Its ears picked up something subtle, a continuous, low hiss, almost imperceptible. Not wind, not insects, rising heat. The track, compacted by tires earlier in the day, had stored warmth. As the surrounding ground cooled, the track released heat upward slowly, creating a thin layer of moving air just above its surface. That air kept dust alive. The fox waited. Waiting was its strategy here. Bat-eared foxes did not chase blindly. They listened prey into existence. Termites, beetles, larvae all announced themselves when the ground allowed sound to travel cleanly. Tonight, it did not. The dust never fully settled. Each minute, tiny movements, thermal currents, insect disturbance, distant steps, kept it suspended. Sound blurred, directions smeared. The fox adjusted posture, lowering its chest closer to the ground to listen through vibration rather than air. Its ears tilted outward, trying to isolate frequencies that dust could not swallow. Something moved. A faint clicking. Termites beneath the surface, active longer than usual because warmth persisted. Normally, the fox would triangulate precisely and dig once. It did not dig. The dust layer above the track absorbed the sound unevenly, reflecting it late. The clicking seemed closer than it was. The fox waited longer. Patience stretched. Another movement came, this time a rodent crossing the track quickly. Its paws disturbed the dust, lifting it again into suspension. The fox heard movement, but not shape. The fox did not strike. This place punished guessing. Instead, it stepped off the track and onto cooler ground beside it. There, dust settled almost instantly. Sound sharpened. The fox listened again. The rodent paused at the track edge, hesitating between cool ground and warm line. That hesitation mattered. The fox struck laterally, crossing the track at an angle rather than waiting within it. The pounce landed where dust had already fallen, where air was honest. The kill was clean. The fox dragged the prey farther from the track before feeding, keeping its ears active the entire time. Behind it, the dust above the track still hovered faintly, refusing to fall flat. After feeding, the fox returned, but not onto the track. It moved parallel to it, one body length away, using the track as a boundary rather than a listening post. Here, prey still hesitated. Insects still clustered near warmth. But sound behaved properly again. The fox caught termites, then another small rodent, both at the edge, never within the dust line itself. The lesson formed quickly. The night track no longer reset when night arrived. Heat stored during the day escaped slowly, dragging time with it. Dust that should have settled instead became a permanent veil, blurring sound and hiding truth. This was not wind, not weather, it was memory. The fox waited until the early hours, when the ground finally cooled enough for the dust to fall completely. Only then did the track become usable again. Quiet, sharp, honest. By then, the fox had already fed. It moved on before dawn, leaving the track behind, still pale under starlight, still pretending to be silent. But the fox knew better now. Silence that never finished was not silence at all. It was noise stretched thin by heat that refused to leave, and for a hunter whose survival depended on knowing exactly when the ground stopped moving air, a place where dust did not settle was not a gift. It was a delay, and delay, at night, was where mistakes waited longest. The bat-eared fox returned to the night track later than usual, long after the moon had climbed high enough to bleach contrast from the ground. Normally, this was the hour when everything simplified. Heat finished leaving the soil. Dust lay flat. Sound sharpened into thin, readable lines. Tonight, it did not. The track still breathed. The fox approached from downwind, stopping well short of the compacted lines. From here, it listened not to prey, but to the ground itself. The low hiss remained, fainter than before, but persistent. Warm air still rose from the track, thin and continuous. The dust hovered again when the fox tested it lightly with one paw. It settled slower than it should have. That meant the delay was structural now, not temporary. The fox stepped closer and waited at the track's edge, ears angled forward and downward. It listened through its skull, using bone conduction to pick up vibration from insects beneath the surface. Something moved. Termites were active again, clicking faintly beneath the crust. The fox marked their location, then waited. It waited too long. The clicking did not sharpen. It smeared. Dust absorbed high frequencies and bent lower ones, delaying arrival just enough to make distance unreliable. The fox shifted position slightly, recentering its weight. The dust lifted again. That was the problem. Every adjustment recreated noise. Waiting no longer produced clarity, it produced accumulation. The fox stepped off the track once more and waited in cooler soil. Here, dust lay flat. Sound snapped into focus. The termites were closer than expected. The fox dug once, cleanly, extracting prey quickly. It fed without lingering, ears never relaxing. Afterward, it returned parallel to the track, testing different distances. 1 body length away, dust still lifted slightly when disturbed. 2 body lengths away, it did not. The fox mapped the invisible boundary. Prey behavior had adjusted too. Rodents approached the track, paused, then turned away or crossed quickly. They did not linger in the warm dust zone. Insects clustered there, but did not stay long enough to form stable patterns. The fox understood then. The track was no longer a place to wait. It was a place to pass through, or avoid. Waiting required silence that completed itself. Here, silence never finished forming. The fox adapted. Instead of listening for prey beneath the track, it listened for prey responding to the track. Hesitation at the boundary became the signal. Movement away from the dust line mattered more than movement within it. The fox positioned itself accordingly, staying just outside the thermal plume. A rodent crossed late, misjudging timing. The fox struck laterally again, landing in settled dust where sound behaved honestly. Another clean kill. The fox fed briefly, then moved farther along the track to test again. The same pattern repeated. Dust lingered. Heat rose. Sound blurred. This was no longer about one section of track. The entire route had been conditioned by repeated daytime use. Tires compacted soil, increased thermal mass, and delayed nightly cooling. The result was a long linear zone where night arrived late and left slowly. The fox abandoned the track entirely before dawn. It moved into open savanna where dust settled properly and insects followed predictable rhythms. There, listening worked again. At first light, the fox looked back. The track lay pale and quiet, dust invisible, heat nearly gone. To any observer, it appeared normal again. But the fox knew. Tonight it would behave the same way, and the night after that. The lesson settled fully. Waiting only worked when the ground completed its transition from day to night. Where heat lingered, waiting became a trap, stretching attention, blurring judgment, and rewarding impatience. The bat-eared fox would still use tracks like this, but only as edges, only as boundaries, never again as places to wait. Because in the dark, noise did not always come from movement. Sometimes it came from ground that refused to finish cooling, and from dust that never quite decided to lie down. The final change did not come at night. It came during the day. The bat-eared fox sensed it long before darkness returned, when the savannah still lay quiet under a pale afternoon sky. The track looked unchanged, 2 shallow lines, lightly dusted, softened by wind. No vehicles passed while the fox watched. That was the problem. The damage was already done. Repeated traffic, spaced just far enough apart to avoid visible ruts, had pressed the soil deeper than before. Not broken, not churned. Simply compressed until its internal structure changed. Air pockets collapsed. Moisture was forced downward. Thermal mass increased. The ground the fox would hunt at night was being prepared hours earlier. By dusk, the fox returned to the track and stopped farther back than usual. Even before stepping onto it, the fox felt the difference. Heat radiated upward more evenly now, not in patches. The entire length of the track exhaled slowly, like a surface that no longer knew how to cool quickly. When the fox disturbed the dust this time, it did not bloom and hover, it rolled. The dust lifted in a thin sheet and drifted laterally along the track instead of settling or rising. Air movement had become directional, guided by the linear heat source beneath. That erased orientation completely. The fox froze. This was new. Earlier, dust had blurred sound. Now it carried it, moving noise sideways, bending direction until origin became meaningless. The fox did not step onto the track. It waited and listened from the margin, ears spread wide, trying to isolate vibration from beneath the surface. Termite activity was present, but smeared along the line. Clicking arrived stretched and duplicated, as if multiple sources existed where there was only one. The fox adjusted position again. The effect followed. The track had become a conduit. Sound entered it, travelled, and exited elsewhere. Waiting here no longer produced information. It produced false certainty. Prey behaviour reflected the change. Rodents no longer paused at the edge. They crossed quickly or avoided the track entirely. Insects lifted, moved, and dispersed without settling. Nothing lingered long enough to be targeted. The fox understood. This track was no longer just warm. It was active. Heat release now shaped airflow, airflow shaped dust, and dust shaped sound. A feedback loop had formed, one that did not require wind, movement, or disturbance to persist. The fox tested one last time. It stepped onto the track and held still. Dust lifted faintly around its paws and slid away down the line. Sound arrived late and flattened. The fox's ears caught multiple echoes of its own movement returning from different directions. It stepped back immediately. This place punished stillness. The fox left the track completely and moved into untouched ground, where soil cooled honestly and dust lay flat. There, sound collapsed into silence the way it should. Termites clicked distinctly. Movement had edges again. The fox fed successfully before midnight. It did not return. From a low rise, it looked back at the track one final time. In the starlight, it appeared inert, just another pale line across dark ground. But the fox knew what it had become. A place where night arrived late and left slowly. A place where dust never fully settled. A place where waiting stretched noise instead of reducing it. The lesson was complete. The most dangerous changes did not roar or break the land. They repeated gently, evenly, until ground learned a new behaviour and taught the air above it to behave differently too. For a hunter whose survival depended on silence finishing its work, A place where silence never completed was worse than open ground, because open ground told the truth quickly. This track did not lie loudly, it lied by never stopping. The bat-eared fox turned away and moved on, adjusting its territory once more, not by distance, but by how long the ground took to become quiet. And it would remember this place not as a path, or a hunting line, or a resource, but as a reminder that night could be held open artificially, stretched thin by heat, dust, and repetition, until listening itself became unreliable. That was not night, that was delay, and delay was where mistakes waited longest.